Many of us can have a very distorted sense of time. Our experience of the years of our life can create a false sense of where we are in the order of things, in the order of God's plan, in the order of human history itself. Our experience of even a single year when we're young can be very different to when we grow older. And so when people are warned that we are living in the last days, they may often sneer. They may say, well, I've heard this before. People have been saying this for decades, even for centuries. And of course, those people who have been saying it for centuries are right. They were right. I'm 60 years old. And so it takes just 33 times my lifetime to go back 2,000 years. 33 of my lifetime. My life seems like the blink of an eye, but just 33 times what I've lived takes us back to the time of the Incarnation. End to end, my lifetime, 33. The blink of an eye. In the 14th chapter of the Gospel of St. Luke, Jesus tells us a parable of a man inviting guests to a supper. And the parable, of course, is a teaching of God's love for mankind and the divine economy of salvation. But first we should notice that it is to supper that the guests are invited. Not to breakfast, not to lunch, but to supper. Supper is the late meal. It is the late meal of the day. It signifies that Christ came into the world in the last days of mankind. He came, if we like, in the evening of the age. The incarnation occurs at the evening of the age of mankind. And supper time signifies the appointed time, the proper time. During the reign of Caesar Augustus, God discerned that the corruption of man had reached a point where sin had displayed itself in all its forms. Sin had come in all its forms. And of course, we see this continuing in our own age, our own day. It had reached a point, we may say as in the days of Noah, that cleansing must take place. Cleansing. The devil has drawn mankind into his full measure of iniquity, in readiness, of course, for the appearance of the Antichrist. And of course, the devil will do many terrible things through the Antichrist in the world, and there will be great suffering. But we are talking about the iniquity that has grown in men's hearts, the iniquity to which we have willingly given ourselves, not just the suffering that the devil imposes and invokes in the world. First of all, we mustn't be disheartened. The parable tells us that God's invitation is for all people. The first invited who refused represent the Jews. They refused to come to the feast. And so the servant is sent out. He's sent out with the instruction to go to the roads, to the hedges, to find the people, meaning the Gentiles, those who are out there. Those who reject the divinity of Christ will not attend the feast. They will not attend the feast. And Jesus shows us why it is they refuse the invitation. He details what it is, the excuses they gave to refuse this invitation. We're told one bought a piece of ground and had to tend it. And of course the church fathers say this means those who are governed by the world, a piece of earth, a piece of land. They are governed by the world, by its thinking, by its logic, by its philosophy. And by worldly standards, who can accept that a man has been born of a virgin? Where in worldly reasoning and logic does any of this make sense, that God would become man? And then we are told by Jesus that one bought 5 oxen and gave his excuses. And again, the church fathers say these 5 oxen represent the 5 senses, the 5 physical senses of the body. It's a warning that we mustn't be yoked to the experiences of the body by both its experiences and its evidence, but also its pleasure and its comfort. If we are so concerned with the world, we will reject God's invitation to worship Christ. A worldly state of mind, an attachment to the world, will prevent us from worshipping our Lord. The teachers, the scribes who rejected Christ, are then replaced with the poor, with the lowly of the world, those in the hedges and the roads. The Israelites were inside the city. They had been given the law of God, the law of Moses. They had received this, but still they rejected God when he came to them. The Gentiles were strangers. They were foreigners. They were foreigners and strangers to the covenant that God was establishing with his people. But they became God's people in their response to his invitation. It was the poor and the lonely, the multitude of the world, that were given the opportunity to become the people of God. They were offered, they were given this invitation. And of course, there were many amongst them too who would reject, who would refuse, and go on refusing. God invites us sinners to his kingdom, and it is our choice whether we will cling to the world, the flesh, to human logic, to human reasoning, or whether we will respond and enter into God's eternal feast.